You are enough. Yeah. Please go ahead and invite your friends, invite your colleagues. If you're watching this video pre-recorded, please just forward it a little bit for about a minute or two, and we're going to start in about a minute or two. We just want to take out time for the purpose of those who are live, all right, to allow people to join, and then we'll start in 2 minutes. All right. You know, I love this song. Forever enough, always enough, more than enough. Woo! I'm already chosen. I know who I am. I know what you've spoken. I'm more than in love, more than I could imagine. That is enough. Woo! Welcome. I'm excited to have you here today. All right, go ahead and invite a friend, invite a colleague. Let them know that Market Faith is on, and it is going to be a big blessing to you. All right, thank you for joining. For those who are joining in, thank you. All right, go ahead and wave. Let us know where you're joining us from. Please type in the chat box. All right, I'm Kayode from Kunle from the US, wherever you're joining us from. Thank you so much, all right, for being a part of this broadcast. All right, thank you. Wow, thank you for being a part of today's session. We're so excited to have you. That is enough. That is enough. We're starting in a few seconds, so please go ahead and remind your friends and colleagues, and we'll get right into it. Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of Market Faith. All right, thank you so much for joining me today on today's episode of Market Faith. I'm delighted, all right, to welcome you. We're going to get right into it and dive in very quickly. And today we want to talk about, simple, basic guidelines for using debt in your business. So simple and basic guidelines for using debt in your business. Right now, I'm going to try as much as possible not to make this complex and to make this very simple, because this is what I will call debt 101. All right, these are the basics of understanding how to use debt in your business. All right, because many of us will be in a position where we need debt to do one thing or the other. So how do you do that, and how do you work with that? All right, and all of that. Because let me start by saying this: debt is a loaded gun, right? Debt is like a loaded gun, right? You can use it to shoot yourself in the head, hurt yourself, or you can use it to protect yourself from intruders that want to come into your home, from intruders that want to come into your private space. All right, so when you have a gun, right, a gun is neither good nor bad. A gun is dependent on the person holding it and is dependent on the purpose for which it is being used. All right, so what that means is that debt is like a gun, right? Debt is neither good nor bad, right? What it is that there are situations where debt is very good, and there are situations where debt is not so good. Why? It depends on the intention, it depends on the objective, it depends on what exactly it is that you're trying to do. So debt is like a loaded gun. You can use it to kill, you can use it to protect, you can use it, for whatever it is that you want to do. Now, the other thing I want to say to you as a rule of thumb when it comes to using debt is this, because debt, a lot of people have gotten into trouble with debt, and some people have made up their minds and said, never again will I collect debt. When they saw maybe the way their parents, experienced the issues that they had with debt, they made a vow and said, never again. Listen, don't be so quick to make such a vow. The reason why is that you will probably need debt. Debt is what you also refer to as OPM, other people's money, right? Every time, let me put it this way, right? Your lifetime is not enough to work for everything you need. Your lifetime is not enough to work for everything you need to want to make the kind of impact you want to make. So you need to leverage. You need other people's money, other people's resources, other people's time, other people's efforts, etc. to make a significant impact in this life. So you can never do it alone. So it's important that you understand. So I'm not on the school of thought that says that you shouldn't use debt. No, I think that debt is important and debt is critical, but you should do it the right way. That's what I believe, right? You should grow responsibly, you should use debt responsibly, all right, and do things responsibly. So what is the rule of thumb that I want to share with you? This is the rule of thumb. Do not take on debt for anything that cannot pay for itself. Do not take on debt for anything that cannot pay for itself. I'll give you an example. Don't take on debt to buy a car that you are going to use for yourself, and that car is not generating money to pay for itself. If you bought a car and you're using it for Uber or for Lyft, then that car is doing business to take care of itself and pay for itself. But when you are borrowing money to consume something, right, it means you probably cannot really afford it, all right, and you are leveraging and relying on something else to be able to afford it. So as a rule of thumb, when I was much younger, those days back in school, one of the in things were, the fact that you had a car in school on campus, and your sound system was massive. It was, these days, millennials, Gen X, Gen Z, they really don't care about such things, right? But when we were in school, it was about the kind of car you were driving, in fact, at the time we used to say things like alloy spinning, AC tight, bedu is the sound and the music, bedu blasting, tinted glasses, mahogany wheels. Those were the things that we were always talking about back then in school, right? And then I remember a guy who actually took on debt to buy a stereo for his car. Can you believe that? He took on debt to buy a car stereo. How will that pay for itself? I don't get it, right? Okay, so the rule of thumb is this: take on debt only to use it for something that can repay that thing. If it cannot, then my advice will be not to take on debt in that particular situation. So very quickly, I want to run through about 5 or 6 guidelines, things that I consider very important, guidelines for you to have at the back of your mind when you are considering taking on debt, all right? The first thing I want to say is this: do not take on debt for an unsure startup. Anything without a track record is unsure. Anything without a track record is unsure. And when I say track record, I'm not just referring to other people's track record. I'm talking about your own track record as well. If you have not proven it, if you have not tried it before, right, taking it on board for you may be a dangerous thing. David wanted to go and fight Goliath. He knew that that was not the time to start trying on the armor of Saul. He needed to go with something that he was tried and trusted. When you are starting a new venture, that's not the time to go and take on debt. You don't take on debt to start a new laundry business or to start a new supermarket that you don't know about and things like that. You are just making things very difficult for yourself. If you need money and it's a startup, equity is often better in that kind of situation, because what you do is that people are taking risk with you. If things go south, right, if things go south, you are not really in trouble. You don't have this huge amount of money to pay. Or you can take on what you call a convertible note, right? A convertible note with an option and all of that. Because if you don't want somebody to be a partner with you in business, but the person has money and you take on a convertible note, what that means is that you take on money today from the person, perhaps as equity, and you can convert it maybe to debt later, or you take it on board as debt and you can convert it to equity later in the business. All right, so you can take on a convertible note, you can take on pure play equity, but when you want to take on debt, you need to just be very, very careful. So if you're taking on a convertible note, right, you're taking it on as equity, and it can be converted later on. Okay, the second thing is this. The second guideline is do not borrow to invest directly per se, but to leverage, right? One of the things that created the financial crisis that we had 2008 2009 was when people were borrowing money to buy stocks. They were borrowing money to invest directly in certain places. Just imagine you borrow money from a bank to buy the stock of that particular bank. I mean, that's just a recipe for disaster. That's just a recipe for failure. All right, when you are borrowing and you are taking on debt, let it be that you are leveraging to take on something else. So you are taking on the debt so that you can add to the money that you have to take on a particular type of business that you are trying to do. Very, very important. All right, do not borrow money just so that you can do those type of direct investments where even the investment is not sure. I mean, I've seen people borrow money to buy stocks. I've seen people borrow money to invest in something that even that thing is not very sure, and everybody it just gets into a lot of trouble, and it's a big mess. Okay, then the other thing is this: you can borrow money to actually save money. All right, you can borrow money to actually save more money. So let me give you an example. Let's assume that you pay a supplier, let's say 100,000 every single month. If you pay on time, the supplier maybe will give you a 1% discount on that money that you want to pay. All right. What that means is that in 12 months, you will have received a 12% discount on that money. But if you need money a lot more urgently, or you still need some of the resources and some of that money to do something, what you can do is to take on debt at a lower interest rate so that you still have some sort of spread that you can take advantage of. So for example, if you are taking advantage of the supplier's offer and you are getting that 1% discount on making payments, you can take on debt perhaps maybe at 6% or at 7% per annum. Remember that you are already enjoying the 12% discount. You can take on debt that you're paying back at maybe 6 or 7% so that you can take advantage of the 1% that is available, pay the supplier, all right, that amount of money, because if you don't pay on time, you're going to lose that discount. You pay the supplier, get that discount, and the difference to you is not too significant because you also have a spread that you're making out of that. All right. So again, but you need to really talk to a financial advisor, and that's very important. All right. As a matter of fact, this is a disclaimer that we need to put out there. Okay. Whatever I say, you need to speak to a professional, you need to speak to a financial advisor to understand the context of what you're doing, to understand the context of the debts that you're trying to take before you go ahead and follow this advice and these guidelines. Okay, so very, very important. Okay, you can take on debt also, which is the fourth guideline. All right, to do something that increases your income. Remember the principle, and we're just talking about how this applies in different scenarios. All right, to do something that increases your income. So for example, you can take on debt so that you can increase your marketing to ensure that money keeps coming into your business. But if you're going to do that, my advice is to ensure that your existing cash flow without the new marketing working can pay for that debt. So for example, if currently you make 50 million, or let's say you make 50,000 a month, right? And you want to take on debt so that you can increase your sales to 100,000 a month. Make sure that the debt you are taking on with a cash flow of 50,000 a month, you can pay back that debt. Because if the marketing efforts does not work, you want to be sure that your existing business without the new effort, right, can pay for that business. All right. The fifth guideline that I want to share very quickly is that you can take on debt to hire employees, but certain types of employees. Again, remember the principle that whatever you are taking on debt for must be paying for itself. So for example, if you take on debt so that you can hire salespeople who will sell more and bring in more money into the business, that is understandable. All right. But if you take on money, debt, to hire people just for luxury, to hire an EA, to hire people that are not necessarily revenue generating. In some cases, maybe an EA taking on some things. EA is executive assistant. So maybe an executive assistant taking on some things for you can free you up so that you can make more money and pay back that. Then one can understand that. And again, which is why I talked about the importance of getting a financial advisor and speaking to that person. Let the person understand your context. Let the person understand your context very, very importantly as well before you go ahead and take on debt. All right, so you can take on debt to hire specific types of people, not all types of people. Okay, that's very, very important. And then the last thing I'll say is this: look, just make sure that your return on investment is greater than the interests and the cost of borrowing. All right, so for example, you want to fulfill an order for a client. A client has given you an order to supply 20 trucks of a particular product, and you want to fulfill that order and you don't have the money to acquire those things. Okay, you can take on debt on the basis of the fact that the money that you're going to be making from that particular transaction will obviously pay back the interest on the debt and leave you with some more things in your business. All right, so again, this is just a very quick exhortation to you, a very quick review of the situations where you can take on debt, the guidelines for doing that. You don't take on debt just because you have the opportunity to take on debt. It's very important that you get a financial advisor. It is very important that you speak to someone who is a professional, but also the guiding thought and principle in your mind should be this: is the debt that I'm taking, and the reason for the debt that I'm taking, able to pay back the debt that I'm taking on board? If that is not happening, right, then you want to reconsider it. All right. So I'm always very skeptical when I see people taking on debt to buy a car for their own use, private use, not necessarily as like an Uber, or not necessarily to make your sales guys a lot more efficient. I'm always very skeptical when people take on debt to buy assets in their house, which really are not assets if you look at it in the real sense of it. To buy a TV, to buy on all those types of things. I'm always very skeptical about those types of things. I'm skeptical about taking on debt to buy office furniture. I'm skeptical about taking on debt to do things like that. But I'm more bullish when you're taking on debt to improve your marketing and your sales. I'm more bullish if you're taking on debt to hire a salesperson to increase and grow your bottom line and increase your exposure and your ability to make more. I'm a lot more bullish along those lines. But then again, like I said, context is important. Context is everything. Understand the context that you're in and understand from a financial advisor whether you can take on debt in that particular context to get things done in your business. I trust that these things have been very helpful for you and that you find them very helpful. I want to ask you to please do me a favor, right? Put a comment below, okay? Send us an email, feedback@Marketfaith.Online. Let us hear from you. We have our WhatsApp link in our Instagram page on our bio. Click on it, send us a message. We always respond to all those messages. We read those messages, and we want to know and hear from you what you think about the things that we're saying and how much those things are adding value to you. All right, I look forward to seeing you next week, next time, same time. All right, as we share some amazing things and thoughts and principles again that will help you in your business and help you to achieve more. Thank you so much, all right, for joining me today on Marketfaith.Online, and I look forward to seeing you again sometime soon. God bless you.